All right, so that's that story. And of course, we have the media. The media. You know, it's so funny. Wasn't it like a month ago that everyone was like, critical race theory isn't even being taught in schools. We don't even know what you're talking about, Carlin. You guys don't even know how to define critical race theory. Critical race theory, of course, isn't being taught in schools. And today, we have the Los Angeles Times, rinky dink little paper, issuing an editorial what critical race theory is and isn't, and why it belongs in schools. I thought critical race theory wasn't being taught in schools. Have we already moved on so quickly? Here's one of the things that really worries me about the timeline that we're in is that everyone has I feel like everyone has permanent short-term amnesia about everything, about absolutely everything. I feel like we all forget things that happened in the matter of a week. What critical race theory is and isn't, and why it belongs in schools. Race, I'm going to be honest, I haven't read this yet. This is going to be a little bit of a reaction to it, but I think we can kind of suss out what's going on. I just want to pick this apart, this editorial, and, you guys are here, so why not? Race is a touchy subject in this country at the most easygoings of times, and these are not the most easygoings of times. The issue is especially fraught as the nation struggles to come to some kind of racial reckoning after the murder of George Floyd, who died under the knee of a white police officer. That happened over a year and a half ago, and they still use it for everything. It's not surprising, then, that a renewed call for ethnic studies in public schools has caused a nationwide wave of contentious school board meetings, with opponents of such courses hurling accusations of indoctrination and in some cases attempting to recall the election of the leaders they elected. Well, here's our first problem right here, Los Angeles Times. Critical race theory has nothing to do with a call for ethnic studies in public schools. That is not what it is. That is not what it calls for. You are lying, and it is only the second paragraph of this article. The verbal cudgel that opponents wield most often against ethnic studies is that it's a version of critical race. No one says that. Literally, no one is saying that ethnic studies is a version of critical race theory. That is not happening. I want receipts. I want the LA Times to provide receipts. That is not happening. That is a lie. An area of academic study that has emerged during the 1970s and has lately become the French saying I can't pronounce. More than 10 Republican-controlled states have moved to ban the teaching of anything about critical race theory in schools, even though many people have very little idea what this complex vein of scholarship is. Critical race theory is an academic ideology that started in the 1970s that says racism exists everywhere in every person, in every system, in every interaction, in every institution, and the job of the critical race theorist is to explore how racism occurred in any given circumstance. They're not exploring if racism occurred, they're exploring how racism occurred, because racism is always assumed to have occurred. What many of its detractors do realize, and what they can't stand, is that critical race theory challenges the notion that this is a land of equal opportunity for all, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. Oh, here's our second lie. Did anyone catch the second lie? I'm going to read this sentence again, and then I want you to chat in what the second lie is. What many of its detractors do realize, and what they can't stand, is that critical race theory challenges the notion that this is a land of equal opportunity for all, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background. And what's the lie in that sentence, guys? I'm going to keep going, but what's the lie? I want to see it in the chat. As it should. This is a land of equal opportunity, but only for some people. In these groups, opportunity has been passed from one generation to the next, while other groups have perpetually left out. One of the main tenets of critical race theory is to point out this reality and make students of all backgrounds aware of the impact it has on their lives almost every day. Ding, ding, ding. You guys are so smart. You guys are so smart. Sour Kiwi says equality or equity. Equal outcomes. Reagan says CRT is about equity, not equality. You guys are so smart. Yeah, that's exactly right. So critical race theory is not about equality of opportunity, it's about equality of outcome. And we always have to keep that in mind. Now, I think we can all acknowledge on some level that, we are not perfect when it comes to giving everyone of every different type, skin color, gender, what have you, equal access to opportunity. There's still work to do there, but I think everyone can acknowledge that the goal of the American experiment is to give everyone equal access to opportunity. Then what they do with that opportunity is entirely up to them. Do they show up? Do they work hard? Are they consistent? Do they do it every day or do they flake out? Things like that. We want everyone to have equal access to opportunity. And we can all acknowledge, I think, that there's still work to do in that regard. However, critical race theory doesn't want that. Critical race theory wants equality of outcome or equity, and that's a little bit Marxist. That's a little bit Marxist. Someone needs to write a song called That's a Little Bit Marxist. I think someone should do that. It's disturbing enough when parents rise up against their children learning uncomfortable realities. It's deeply problematic for legislators to turn this into a political opportunity by putting a chokehold on the truth. But it's particularly troubling when a board of education assembles a panel to educate itself and the public about ethnic studies. What is it with the ethnic studies? And stacks it with people who detest critical race theory. That's what happened in July at a forum hosted by the Orange County Board of Education, where panelists at times misrepresented critical race theory and made statements about the current state of racism in America that were out of touch and sometimes downright false. That's exactly the tone that I envisioned the Los Angeles Times editorial board having when they wrote that particular sentence. Dragging Water says a lot of people also don't understand the difference between an opportunity or outcome. Also, oftentimes, opportunity is a outcome of your choices. Yeah, I think that's a really, really fair point on both accounts, Dragon Water. The panelists repeatedly talked about the dangers of teaching children that systemic and institutional racism exists. And now they're going to pretend like those are real and proven concepts. Watch. Overall, their presentations went something like this. Once the Jim Crow's days were over and the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, racism in this country was pretty much regulated to an isolated acts of hatred. We're all one and we need to unify. Besides that, look at black students' dismal scores on the standardized math test. Clearly, what's needed to help them is more math instruction, not ethnic studies. Well, I mean, if a student has bad scores on... Wait, hang on. Guys. The Los Angeles Times just argued that the way to get black students' math scores to improve is to give them more ethnic studies classes. You guys catch that? We're all one. We need to unify. Besides, they said, look at the black students' dismal scores on standardized math tests. Clearly, what's needed to help them is more math instruction. Not ethnic studies. Is that what issue does the Los Angeles Times have with that? Now, listen, again, critical race theory is not about ethnic studies, but I'm just going to say that it's probably true that if you're having a problem in math, you need to take more math. I'm just saying. They conceded that low-income children might have been stuck in underfunded schools before, but now the federal aid has raised per pupil for funding them. There's little reason to worry about inequality in education. And one panelist brought up the tried and largely discredited old saw of mishmash theory. The idea that if black students are given a boost into selective colleges, the classwork will become too hard for them. Yeah, this has actually been proven. They've proven this. That if you put black students through affirmative action into highly selective colleges that they are not prepared for, they are not going to be as successful. They're just not going to be. That's been proven. It's also, by the way, just common sense. One other concern voiced by some attendees at the forum was that critical race theory teaches white children that they are oppressors and black and Latino kids that they are perpetual victims. Well, it's not teaching that to Latino kids anymore. They've now moved on. Now they're trying to make Latino kids be oppressors too, by the way. They've moved on. CB says, saw CRT in the English grammar paragraph questions. I'm not sure what that means, CB, but okay. They have a point. Some badly fashioned curricula based on critical race theory separates and isolates groups and implies that white students should feel guilty. That's neither inherent to the theory nor is it its aim, says Teresa Montano, professor of Chicano and Chicana studies at Cal State Northridge. Teresa is a liar. Teresa is a liar. Teresa is a liar. That is inherent to critical race theory. Sorry. A proponent of critical race theory, Montano was originally scheduled to be on the panel but withdrew, saying she's been told this would be a conversation by ethnic studies experts, but that instead it was a stacked panel of people who were uninterested in discussing ideas. Montano was pretty much correct, but her presence was missed. She could have informed some very uninformed people about what critical race theory is. She's not even a professor in that area. I'm sorry, like, by her own title, she is not a professor in a subject matter that would have, like, I mean, you could argue she probably has been exposed to it, but that's not related to critical race theory. Sorry. The one frequently repeated statement that made sense during the forum is that students needed to learn facts rather than being indoctrinated into taking one side or another. True as that is in principle, is the Los Angeles Times about to argue for the indoctrination of students? I think they are. True as that is in principle, the discussion showed that what is considered a fact really is a matter of individual or group viewpoint. The Los Angeles Times editorial board has just argued that there is no such thing as facts. Journalism. At the heart of critical race theory is the concept of systemic and institutional racism, the notion that racism isn't an occasional aberration of individuals acting in biased or hateful ways, but entire systems that have built up over this nation's history that put people of color at a perpetual disadvantage and that will take purposeful action to remedy. Sic Semper Tyrannis says when you lower entry standards for minorities but keep them high for white and Asian students, common sense dictates that minorities will struggle. I mean, there's also something to be said for the fact that, like, listen, not everyone is meant to go to an Ivy League school. I'm sorry, like, not everyone's meant to go to an Ivy League school. Like, I went to a really, like, mediocre high school, right? And I ended up at Boston University, and I was so blessed to get into Boston University. But to be quite frank, like, Boston University is obviously not Ivy League, but it's a pretty dang good school. Like, I really struggled. My first couple of years at BU, I really struggled. I was not prepared for that college. I really wasn't. Now, it worked out okay, and by the end of my time there, I was making, like, dean's lists and stuff. But I really, really struggled at first because my preparation in high school was completely out of whack for what I encountered in college. And I went, like, everyone was white. Actually, that's not true. There may be like one or two non-white kids in my high school, but there weren't really many. And it was a very small school in a very, like, white state. So that's not just, I'm not saying this is just, Black or Latino kids. I'm saying that everyone who comes from shitty high schools are going to have a harder time, particularly when you get into the like more elite universities. It's just the way it is. Just look at the situation in our schools. Research shows that black male students incur harsher discipline at schools than white ones for the same infractions. Low-income children live with daunting obstacles to academic achievement, including daily food insecurity for 1 in 6 children, according to the Children's Defense Fund. Have you tried feeding a family on the amount of food assistance programs provide? And historically underfunded schools staffed by teachers who assume students will not succeed. Well, all of those things to me seem to be the problems that adults should fix. The solution to any of these problems is not teaching children that white people are oppressors and that everyone who is non-white is oppressed. That is not going to solve any of these problems. What if instead of teaching critical race theory in schools, we took that energy and harnessed it to fixing these problems? These problems. That would be a much better use of energy. Dragonwater says, so does that mean it is only the author's opinion that the oppressor-oppressed dichotomy isn't part of CRT? Of course it is. Of course it is. It's an attitude that rubs off, and it doesn't magically get waved away by correcting funding formulas now. Oh, I'm sorry. This isn't about correcting funding formulas now. It's about teaching children when their brains are still developing that they are either oppressors or oppressed. Got it. In other words, it's a lot more to it than spending more money on math instruction. These schools help perpetuate systems that held some students back while launching others to success. Just working harder isn't going to cut it. The very fact that panelists, as well as politicians, journalists, and education experts, reflexively use the phrase low-income Black and Latino students is telling. Hang on a second. You're telling me you got a panel of critical race theorists and you're surprised that they're using terminology that says low-income Black and Latino students? Why are we assuming that all low-income people are Black and Latino? Sounds a little bit racist to me. Let's see. Okay, we're almost done. The term almost goes together in metropolitan areas because of a long history of frameworks that put those groups at a disadvantage. White people get some professional jobs that lift up their income, then helps their Wow. Check this out. Los Angeles Times editorial board. White people get professional jobs that lift their incomes, then help their friends get hired at the same places. Friends who are usually white. That's not intentional hateful racism, but it is a system that acts in racist ways day after day across the country. Why are we assuming that white people only have white friends? Is that because that's what Robin DiAngelo told the Los Angeles Times in White Fragility? Robin DiAngelo writes about this in White Fragility. Says that white people are not capable of having deep and meaningful friendships with Black people. She literally, that's not an exact quote, but that's not far off from what she wrote. It's pretty dang close. White people are not, this is Robin DiAngelo, white people are not capable of having deep and meaningful friendships with Black people. That comes from Robin DiAngelo right there. Yes, it is important to acknowledge that critical race theory confuses parents and the public and many educators because, okay, so if critical race theory is confusing educators, then why do we want those same educators teaching it? If it confuses educators, then why do we want those same educators teaching it? I don't understand. Because its adherents take different views about how it should be interpreted and used. Those who rail against it point with some justification at the first draft of California's model ethnic studies curriculum, which Montana played a role in creating. It attempted to inculcate in students the ideas that capitalism is, like racism, a form of oppression and power. And ding, 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 there we go. There we go. There we go. California's model of ethnic studies, which is what these parents were protesting in the dang first place, attempted to inculcate in students the idea that capitalism is, like racism, a form of oppression and power. Guys, fill in the blank for those in the chat. Critical race theory is not about race. It is about blank. What is in that blank? Critical race theory is not about race. It is about blank. What do you think is in that blank? And in the meantime, while I'm waiting for those answers to come in, guys, please make sure to mount that like button. And if you're new here, please make sure you subscribe to my channel. Just give it a double check. Give it a double check. Even if you think you're subscribed, just give it a double check, subscribe, then hit that bell, turn on notifications. That's going to make it much more likely you see content when I post it. But mount that like button, please. Power! Yes! Critical race theory is not about race. Critical race theory is about power. And what are they using that power for? To destabilize the system. And what system am I talking about? Capitalism. Bomb Globe says, racism solved. Great job, everyone. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Dragonwater also says, thank you for the support, Dragonwater. I came from a small high school in rural Northern California with an IEP for learning disabilities and had a hard time in college, and honestly, I'm not sure I actually deserve my Psych BA with the grades I got. Well, Dragonwater, you made it out. You did the work. Don't ever let anyone feel like you don't deserve what you've earned, buddy. The curriculum left no room for the idea that there might be another side and that students should research and debate in meaningful ways. Huh. Huh. Does that sound like something we want in public schools? The curriculum left no room for the idea that there might be another side to destroying capitalism, and that students could research and debate this in meaningful ways because that's what critical race theory does. It takes away your ability to dissent from critical race theory. The same was true of its one-sided and loaded take on the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts, its list of social justice groups worth studying, and various other topics. It might not matter what's in the model curriculum, which has been overhauled in response to several volleys of critiques. School districts don't have to use it, even if the state mandates an ethnic studies course as a high school graduation requirement. And that might be the biggest problem at all. In very progressive areas of the state, something akin to the original troublesome model curriculum is being adopted. In conservative areas, ethnic studies will likely be watered down to a modern version of last week's National Brotherhood Week. Wow. So the Los Angeles Times basically is decrying the fact that in conservative areas of the state, they don't have to use a curriculum that teaches that capitalism, like racism, is a form of oppression and power, and that there's no meaningful room for debate in that curriculum. And the Los Angeles Times, like, that's really something we should be teaching. Damn you conservatives for ruining everything. It is true that students should not be proselytized to and told what to believe, but they need to be taught the truth. The nation's truth of its most marginalized groups must not be glossed over. Students should be researching the very rich and thorough disturbing topic of this nation's racial history and creating realities, learning both sides of controversial topics, and debating those with others as they learn to reach informed and independent opinions. The Orange County Forum is the chance to demonstrate that very thing. If these adults can't be bothered to do open-minded research and deliver balanced reports based on full facts, how can we expect students to carry it off? If nothing else, the bias shown by panelists and board and most of the audience illustrated why an ethnic studies course is needed in our high schools, and why the study of systemic and institutional racism needs to be a part of it. All right. So the Los Angeles Times wrote an entire editorial about why critical race theory should be taught in schools, using the argument of students need to learn systemic and institutional racism. And they never even properly defined those terms. Congratulations, Los Angeles Times. You did exactly what the colleges wanted you to do. Dragonwater said, debate is dysfunctional, leads to people shouting past each other. No learning. I agree with you there, Dragonwater. It's why I generally do not debate. All right, guys, we've got a couple stories left. We've got a couple good ones. The last one, you guys are going to want to stick around for the last one. You really, really are. You really are. But in the meantime,